Look at your hosta right now. Out there in the July heat, the big leaves gone limp by 2 in the afternoon, drooping like the plant has just given up on the whole summer. You think it's dying, it is not. And what you do to that plant over the next 3 weeks decides how big it comes back next spring. Not this year. Next year, right now, while the rest of the garden steals all your attention, your hosta is quietly deciding its own future, and almost nobody tells you that. The garden center surely won't... They would rather sell you a fresh gallon pot every April than teach you to grow the one you already own into something twice the size. We have done this a different way for generations. Where I was raised, the hostas along the north side of the wash house came back bigger every single year, and we never once bought a bag of anything special to make it happen. Stay with me, because right around the middle of this, I'm going to show you how to stop the slugs from turning your hosta into lace for less than the price of a cup of coffee, the exact way my grandfather did it with something he kept in the cellar. But first, do me one small favor. Drop a comment and tell me 2 things. What state you garden in, and whether your hostas get morning sun or afternoon sun. That one answer changes everything about what I'm about to tell you, and I read every one of them. I grew up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. My grandfather kept a long bed of hostas on the shady side of the barn where the milk cans used to sit cooling in the morning. He never called them hostas. He called them the shade lilies, and my mother divided them every few springs and passed the pieces down the road to the neighbors like they were loaves of bread. Nobody paid for a hosta in our valley. You were given one, and you kept it alive, and someday you gave a piece away too. So let me tell you what your plant actually needs this month, and why almost everyone in the modern world gets it exactly backwards. Here is the first thing, and it's the thing that fools the most people. That afternoon wilting you're seeing is not thirst, it's armor. When the sun beats down and the heat climbs past the mid-80s, a hosta pulls the water back out of its leaves on purpose. The leaves go soft, and they fold down a little, and every instinct you have screams to run for the hose. But the plant is doing something clever. Those big, broad leaves lose water fast through thousands of tiny pores on the underside, and when the air gets hot and dry, the hosta closes those pores and lets the leaves go limp to cut its losses. It's the same reason a man in the field takes off his hat and sits in the shade at noon. Instead of swinging the scythe, you conserve. You wait for the cool. The University of Minnesota's extension folks put words to this years ago. They found that a hosta can look badly wilted on a hot afternoon and be standing back up, firm and full, by the next morning without a single drop of extra water. The wilting in the heat of the day is normal. It is not a distress call, and here is where it costs you. When you see that midday droop and you soak the plant every single afternoon, you're not helping. You're drowning the roots, and you're inviting rot right down at the crown, that thick center where all the leaves come out of the ground. A hosta sitting in warm, soggy soil in July is a hosta setting itself up to melt. So how do you water it, right? You water deep, and you water in the morning. A hosta wants about 1 inch of water a week, and in a hot, dry July stretch, closer to 1.5 inches. But it wants that water all at once, poured slow and deep, not sprinkled a little every day. Deep watering pulls the roots down where the soil stays cool and moist, even in a heat wave. Shallow daily sprinkling trains the roots to stay up near the surface, where they bake the first hot week. You go visit your grandchildren and forget to water. Morning is the key. You water between sunrise and about 9 o'clock, so the leaves dry off fast in the early sun, and the water sinks down to the roots before the heat can steal it. Water in the evening, and you leave those big leaves damp all night long, and a damp hosta leaf in a warm July night is a dinner invitation. I'll come back to who's coming to that dinner. You already know. Now, my grandfather never owned a soaker hose or one of those fancy drip timers the catalogs sell for $60. He had a trick, and you can do it this weekend with something in your recycling bin. Take an empty gallon milk jug, poke 3 or 4 small holes in the bottom with a nail heated on the stove, set it right next to the crown of your biggest hosta, and fill it with water. It empties out slow, over an hour or two, straight down into the root zone, no runoff, no waste, no water sitting on the leaves. My mother lined up a row of them along that barn bed on the hottest weeks, filled them from the pump in the morning, and by the time she'd finished the wash, they were empty and the roots were soaked deep. That is a drip irrigation system that costs you nothing, and it works better than half the plastic gadgets they'll sell you. But watering right is only the beginning, because there's something happening inside your hosta this month that changes the whole game. And this is the part that separates the people whose hostas get bigger every year from the people who wonder why theirs just sit there. Here it is. Right now, in July, your hosta is building next year. Down at the base of the plant, hidden under the soil at the crown, the hosta is forming the buds it will send up next spring. Gardeners call them eyes. Every eye becomes a fan of leaves the following year. The plant sets those eyes in the second half of summer while it's still fat with energy from a full season of leaves soaking up light. So the size and the strength of next year's plant, the number of those eyes, is being decided in the heat of July and August. Right now, while most folks have mentally moved on to their tomatoes, this is why July care matters so much more than anyone gives it credit for. Baby your hosta in the spring and neglect it in July, and you fed the plant while it was just waking up and starved it while it was doing the most important work of the whole year. It's backwards. It's like feeding a workhorse a big breakfast and then nothing at all through the long afternoon of plowing. And this is exactly where the selling starts, so let me warn you before you fall for it. Walk into any big garden store in July and they will point you at a shelf of fertilizers, special hosta food, bloom boosters, fancy pellets with a number on the bag, and a price that makes you blink. $40, some of them, for a jug of something you're told your poor plant simply cannot survive without. My grandfather never bought a single bag of any of it, not once in his whole life. And his hostas grew leaves the size of dinner plates. Here's the truth they don't put on the bag. A hosta is not a hungry plant. It is a slow, steady feeder that lives in the woods in nature, growing in the leaf litter under the trees, fed by nothing but the rotting leaves that fall on it every autumn. It never in its wild life saw a pellet of blue chemical fertilizer. What it wants is a slow, gentle, steady trickle of nutrition and a soil rich in old, broken down organic matter. That's it. That's the whole secret. The shelf full of expensive jugs is built to hide from you. So what do you feed it in July? Something you can make or find for almost nothing. If you're going to feed it all, and a July feeding does help set those big eyes for next year, you want a gentle, balanced, slow feed early in the month. A thin scattering of well-rotted compost worked lightly into the soil around the crown does more good than any jug. If you keep chickens, or know someone who does, a handful of composted, aged manure, and I mean aged, not fresh, worked into that ground is exactly what the woods would have given the plant anyway. Old coffee grounds, dried and scratched into the top of the soil, add a little slow nitrogen and a bit of grit the slugs don't care for, and you are going to throw them out anyway. But here is the one hard rule, and this is the part that saves your plant. Stop feeding by the middle of July, no later. If you push a hosta with nitrogen too late in the summer, you shove it into throwing out soft new leaves right when it should be hardening off and storing energy in the roots for winter. That soft late growth gets hit by the first cold snap and it does the plant real harm. Feed gentle, feed early, and then let it be. My people always fed on the light side and stopped early, and it turns out the plant scientists say the very same thing. The old way was right the whole time. And that is the whole shape of it, the kind of deep, practical knowledge that never made it onto a bag or a bottle, but lived quietly in cellars and barn beds for generations. If you want all of it gathered in one place, the soil secrets, the storage methods, the old-fashioned pest cures that cost pennies, I put it into a field edition you can use right alongside your garden. It's called the Complete Garden Field Edition, and it brings together the garden blueprint and the harvest blueprint into one practical resource built on exactly this kind of plain, proven knowledge. You can find the link down in the description, and it's priced at $97 for everything, no subscriptions, no upsells, just the whole thing in your hands. I'll leave the link below if you want to take a look. But let's get back to the enemy I promised you at the start, because this is the one that breaks the most hearts in July. Now, if you feed too much or water too much or do both, you set the table for the enemy, and it's time I told you about the enemy, because this is the one that breaks the most hearts in July. You go out one morning and your hosta looks like someone took a paper punch to it. Holes everywhere, ragged edges, the big beautiful leaves you were so proud of turned into lace overnight. and you never saw a thing do it because the thing that did it works in the dark. Slugs. A slug is nothing but a snail without a shell, a soft, slow creature that hides under the leaves and in the mulch all day and comes out at night to rasp holes in your hosta with a tongue covered in tiny teeth. And July, warm and humid with morning dew and damp shade, is the very peak of their season. One hosta can feed a whole colony of them, and they will come back night after night until there's nothing left but stems. Now here is where the outside world gets fleeced, and I want you to hear this before you spend another dollar. The store will sell you slug pellets, blue ones, in a jug, often $10 or $15, and they'll tell you it's the only way. But so many of those old pellets carry poison that isn't safe around your dog, your cat, your grandchildren playing in the yard, or the toads and birds that would happily eat the slugs for you for free. You are paying money to poison the very helpers nature sends you. An entire industry is built on selling you the cure for a problem while quietly killing off the free solution that was already living in your garden. My grandfather solved slugs with things that cost him nothing, and I'm going to give you the whole toolkit, and then I'm going to give you the one that actually works the best, the one I promised you at the start. First, the simple barriers. Slugs are soft, wet creatures, and they will not willingly crawl across anything sharp or dry or scratchy, so you make a ring around the base of your hosta. Crushed eggshells, dried and broken fine, work. We saved eggshells in a tin by the stove all year for exactly this. Coarse sand works. Diatomaceous earth, that fine white powder made of ancient ground-up shells, works especially well because it's like crawling across broken glass to something that soft. You lay a band of it a couple inches wide right around the crown, and you renew it after a hard rain. It costs pennies. Second, get them out of the daytime hiding. Pull your mulch back a few inches from the crown of the plant so it isn't a cool, damp hotel for them right where they dine. Water in the morning, like I told you, so the leaves and the ground are dry by nightfall. A dry July night is a hungry, unhappy night for a slug. Third, and this is one my father swore by, lay a wide board or an old wet burlap sack flat on the ground near your hostas in the evening. The slugs crawl under it to hide from the coming sun. In the morning, you lift it up, and there they all are, gathered in one place, and you deal with them however you see fit. Free, simple, and it thins their numbers fast. Now, before I give you the very best one, I have to speak to the folks who are sitting there thinking none of this applies to them. Maybe you're looking at a hosta bed that's been in the ground for 15 or 20 years. Big old established clumps, packed in tight, mulched every spring the way it's always been. And you're thinking, this fellow is talking to people just starting out with young little plants. My bed is set. It's too late to change anything now. I want to tell you it is not too late. And in fact, the old established beds are the ones with the most room to improve because they've usually been neglected in exactly the ways I'm describing. Let me give you two things you can do this very weekend to an old bed with nothing but your two hands and what you already own. First, go out and check the crowns of your oldest, biggest clumps. On a plant that's been in the ground many years, the center of the clump often gets crowded and starts to die out, and worse, over the seasons, the crown can slowly heave up so it sits a little high and dries out fast, or mulch and soil pile up over it and hold moisture against it and rot it. Gently brush the mulch back from the very center of each old clump so the crown can breathe. You want that crown sitting right at soil level, not buried, not perched up high. This one small thing, done in July, stops the slow crown rot that quietly kills old hostas from the inside while the outside still looks fine. Second, give that old bed the thing the woods would have given it, and give it for free. If your established hostas are growing in tired, hard, packed soil, you don't need to dig anything up. Just lay down a fresh half-inch of finished compost or well-rotted leaves right on top of the soil around the plants, keeping it back off the crowns, and let the summer rain and the worms carry it down. This is called top dressing, and it's exactly how a forest feeds itself. Every fall, the leaves drop. Every summer they rot down, and the plants underneath get fed from above without anyone lifting a shovel. An old hosta bed top dressed this way in July will show you thicker, greener, more numerous leaves the very next spring, because remember, right now is when it's building next year. You are feeding the future plant. Free compost on top of tired soil is the single best thing you can hand an old established hosta bed, and no one selling you jugs will ever tell you that. And one more, for the old beds especially, if a big old clump has gone thin and holy in the very center, that's the plant telling you it's ready to be divided come the cool of early fall. Mark it in your mind now. One tired old clump becomes 3 strong young ones for free, and you'll have hostas to hand down the road to your neighbors the way my mother did. That is how a whole valley ended up full of the same beautiful shade lilies without a dollar ever changing hands. Now, the slug solution I promised you at the start, the one that works better than any jug of pellets on any shelf for less than a cup of coffee. This is the one my grandfather used, and it turns out the science finally caught up and explained exactly why it works. You've maybe heard of the beer trap? Sink a shallow dish or a tuna can down into the soil so the rim sits level with the ground, pour in some beer, and by morning the slugs have crawled in and drowned. It's an old trick, and it does work. But here's the thing the beer companies would just as soon you didn't figure out. It was never the beer. Researchers looked into why the beer trap works, and what they found is that the slugs are not drawn to the alcohol at all. They're drawn to the smell of the yeast, the fermentation, that living, bready, rising smell. That's the scent that tells a slug there's rotting, fermenting food nearby, and they follow it across the yard and right into the dish. The beer is just an expensive way to deliver a smell you can make yourself for pennies. So here is the recipe, and this is the finale, the thing I most wanted to hand you today. Take a cup of warm water, not hot, just warm. Stir in about a teaspoon of sugar and a small pinch of ordinary baker's yeast, the same yeast for making bread. Let it sit for 10 or 15 minutes until it starts to foam and smell yeasty and alive. That foaming is the fermentation, the very smell the slugs cannot resist. Now pour it into your sunken dish, set level with the soil near your hostas in the evening. By morning, you'll find the slugs have come from all around and drowned in it, and it cost you a pinch of yeast and a spoon of sugar instead of a can of beer or a jug of poison. Studies comparing the two have found this simple sugar and yeast brew pulls in just as many slugs as beer does, sometimes more, because you can make it stronger and fresher than any beer straight out of a can. And unlike the poison pellets, there is nothing in that dish that can harm your dog, your cat, your grandchildren, or the toad who's on your side. You set the traps out at dusk, you empty them in the morning, you refresh the brew every couple of days through the worst of the July damp, and you keep them well away from the crown so you're pulling the slugs off the plant, not toward it. My grandfather kept a little crock of yeast starter down in the cool of the cellar, the same as he did for baking, and on a bad slug year, he'd mix up a batch of this exactly this way and set the dishes out along the barn bed at nightfall. I thought nothing of it as a boy. It was just something we did, the way you'd bank the fire or close the coop at dusk. I had no idea, all those years, that the plant scientists in their universities would one day run their careful tests and discover that the smell of rising bread is the very thing a slug cannot walk away from. We knew it in our bones and in our cellars long before anyone measured it. The old way was the right way the whole time. It always seems to be. And that, right there, is the shape of the whole thing, isn't it? You were told your wilting hosta needed rescuing when it just needed to be left alone through the heat of the day. You were told to water it every evening when a slow, deep drink in the morning does 10 times the good. You were sold jugs of special food a woodland plant never wanted and pellets of poison to kill the slugs when a pinch of yeast and a spoon of sugar does it cleaner and cheaper and safer. Every single one of those problems had a 5-cent answer that the plain people never stopped using, and the outside world was quietly talked out of, one jug at a time. Let me leave you with a picture of the whole July so you have it plain and simple. Water deep, water in the morning, and don't panic when the leaves droop in the afternoon heat, because that's the plant protecting itself, not begging you. Use a nail-poked milk jug to soak the roots slow for free. Feed gentle and feed early. a little compost or aged manure scratched in before the middle of the month, and then stop so the plant hardens off instead of throwing soft leaves it can't protect. Pull your mulch back off the crown so they can breathe, and on your old established beds, lay down a ½ inch of finished compost right on top and let the worms carry it down to feed next spring's plant. And when the slugs come, and in July they will come, skip the poison and skip the beer and set out a dish of warm water, sugar, and a pinch of yeast at dusk. Do that, and the hosta you're worried about right now, drooping in the 2 o'clock sun, will not just survive this summer. It will come back next spring with more eyes, more leaves, and more size than it's ever had, because you'll have fed it and protected it in the 1 month that actually decides the future, the month everybody else spends ignoring it. There's something worth sitting with in all of this. Every one of these answers was cheap. Every one of them used something you already own or something the good Lord already provides for free. An eggshell, a milk jug, a fallen leaf, a pinch of the same yeast that makes your bread rise. Somewhere along the way, the outside world got convinced that caring for a simple shade plant required a whole shelf of bottles and bags and a fresh trip to the register every summer. My people were never sold that story because we were never in the store to hear it. We just kept doing the plain thing that worked year after year and handing the pieces down the road. You don't have to keep overpaying for what nature already hands you at the back door. That's not being cheap. That's being a good steward of what you've been given, and there's real quiet dignity in it. It's who you are, and it's who my grandfather was, standing at that barn bed with his crock of yeast, and now you've got exactly what he had. So do this for me now, before you click away. Go down to the comments and tell me the 2 things I asked at the start. What state you're gardening in, and whether your hostas get morning sun or afternoon sun. I want to see where all of you are, and afternoon sun folks especially. Tell me how your leaves are holding up, because I've got some specific help for you and I answer back. Don't just think it, type it. It only takes a second and it helps me know who I'm talking to. And if you'd like to keep recovering the plain, practical ways the modern world quietly buried, the ways that cost nothing but a little know-how handed down, come along with us. This isn't about supporting some channel. It's about a whole group of us remembering together what our grandparents never had to be taught because they simply knew it. Next time, I'm going to show you the one thing to do to your hostas in the fall, right before the first frost, that decides whether the slugs come back at all next spring. Most folks cut everything back and haul it away, and they're accidentally doing the exact opposite of what protects the plant. There's a right way and a wrong way, and the wrong way is the one everybody does. I'll see you there. Look at your hosta one more time before you go. If this helped, there's more I want to share. Inside the Amish Field Circle, I pick up right where this video stopped, straight through to fall. Ask me your own question, and I answer you myself. No robot. Just me. And you won't be alone. Thousands of Old Ways growers are already inside. Point your phone's camera at the code, and if it isn't for you, cancel anytime. If this helped your hostas, there's plenty more like it waiting right here. Take a moment to subscribe, and stay a while. I've got lots more simple garden tips to share with you.